Hello and a very warm welcome back to Widowed AF. I'm your host, Rosie Gilmoss. Now, each week I invite somebody to come in and tell me their story. And part of what this is, yes, we're talking about the death of somebody that they loved, but we're also going to find out sort of who they were before and how the ripples of the grief continue to have such an enormous impact, even several years after they've died. Now, today's guest is Cathy Brokenshire. Is it Brokenshire, Cathy, or Brokenshire?
It's Brokenshire.
Brokenshire. And I thought that was quite an apt name for a widow, because I kind of feel like I'm a bit Brokenshire sometimes.
Yes, yes.
Now, your husband was, and I'm going to say his full title, he was the Right Honourable James Brokenshire MP, and he was a Conservative MP. So when he died, and I will let you tell your story, but he died from lung cancer, but as a non-smoker. So that must have, generated a lot of questions, because people will want to know, we all think we can't get lung cancer if we don't smoke, right? And also the fact that he was in the public eye, that he was in a job in public office, that will have had added another layer of complication and press intrusion, all that sort of thing. So I think we've got quite a lot to talk about today.
Yes.
And I'm really excited to hear from you. So, Cathy, I will put a cork in it and let you tell me your story. Tell me about James.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. And I'm more than happy to talk about my life with James and how it's obviously developed since then. Basically, I'm just a girl that fell in love with a guy. And that's where our story began. We met in a pub in Chigwell. And that pub is quite famous now for being in Towie. So we met in King William IV, way before Towie was even ever a thing. And I met James with his best mate, Johnny. And I kind of knew that day that I wanted to marry the guy. But I didn't tell him that until our wedding night 8 years later, that I wanted to marry you the first day I met you.
God, you can keep a secret.
It was going off, at that point it was like,
the deal was done.
He wasn't sure about me the first time we met each other. He thought I was very loud, but hey,
was he quite quiet?
No, he wasn't. Maybe he had a bit of competition and he didn't like that.
I was going to say, yeah. Well, how old were you then? How old were you both? I like all the details.
I was 20 and he was 23. So although I find myself as a widow all these years later, I am so grateful that we had an amazing 31 years together. We had 3 incredible kids. I've still got 3 incredible kids. And I had an idyllic lifestyle. And so many people, when you hear stories that, your guests, they don't have 31 years. I mean, it's kind of a lifetime. I would like to think I've got a lot more years ahead of me, but I'm grateful for what I had. And we had, in 31 years, and this is another revelation that people can't believe, we never rowed.
Never rowed. Did you have a good sulk? Surely you had a good sulk sometimes.
No. And I think because he was a city lawyer before he became a politician. And I think he worked long hours there. My parents, I'm going to go back a bit. My parents owned a hotel, and I grew up in the environment from the age of 7 with work coming first and family life coming second. And I think from that, I was a very tolerant person. But he did long hours as a lawyer and as a politician. And I just think when we were together, we just made it work, because often we would only see each other a couple of times a week. We'd be ships passing in the night, and we often used to joke, if I kicked him in bed, that was me saying, hello, darling, I love you. But I was just too tired to talk to him.
And this is so true of so many marriages. And when you're kind of building your life, because one or both of you is, in order to grow their career, to grow a business, they're having to put in those hours. And I like this idea that the time you had was really special. And in a similar way that Ben works abroad. He had his own business, so he used to work in France, and he'd go away. We were very fortunate. He'd go away for 1 week, and then he'd be at home most of the rest of the time. But you have to be supportive. I couldn't work a traditional job because what would I do that week when he was away? So you sort of have to make these compromises, and we too kind of really valued the time we had.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I worked in the city before I had my children. I worked in the banking industry. I used to do crazy hours, not quite as crazy as him. But, you know, I ended up going to his Christmas parties sometimes without him, or a work function without him, because he ended up, he just came out of university. He did his articles as a lawyer and then worked for one company, and he worked his way up, and he ended up being a partner of that law firm
Wow.
before he finally left to leave politics. So he had a long established clear career within his legal world. And of course, I knew all his colleagues. And if he had a deal that was going to go through, I mean, he was in mergers and acquisitions. And if he had a deal that was going to go through, I mean, I used to joke, the client would say jump and he would say how high.
Mm-hmm.
He was beholden to the job. So if there was functions and stuff in the diary, well, I just went without him. So it's a bizarre thing to say that I used to go to stuff without him at his work. But invariably, if I went somewhere and Friday night was traditional, go to the pub and have a drink night, and I would either be with my work colleagues or his. But if I went to his and everyone would say, well, where's James? I'm like, oh, he's working, but he'll be here later. We'll go home together. And he would turn up and we would go home together. We'd have one or two drinks and then he'd go off home, or we'd go off home together. So we made it work. And as I say, I think from my background with my parents, I just got it and it was fine.
And we accept what is normal to us. And if that works for you, then that's brilliant. Some relationships would have found that difficult. And so what prompted, I know this is a widow podcast, but I'm just really interested.
Yeah.
What prompted him to go into politics?
He always was interested in politics. And fundamentally, he trying to be a lawyer because the life of a politician and trying to get into the political world, and actually, yes, on a local level, it's easier. But when you're doing it nationally and you want to be part of a government or a shadow government, it becomes harder to become an MP. And it was always, well, let's be a lawyer and have something to fall back on. But fundamentally, he was passionate. So weekends were spent sort of trying to get a seat somewhere, or looking at constituencies, helping and supporting the party, the YCs as it was in those days, the Young Conservatives, going to various, what am I trying to use the phrase, conferences and things like that. So
a very driven man from a young age.
Very, very driven man, yeah. And it's something he always wanted to do, and I always knew that, and I was always fully supportive. And I know many MPs get a bad press. He was loved by all, and you know, to this day, if I meet someone that has met him, they always have got a lovely story to say about him. And I can sometimes, I can get a story once a month. And I just think there is so much I don't know that he didn't do, and I'm still discovering. Many a journalist has come up to me and said, oh, are you the wife of James? He was a lovely guy, and give me a funny story or an anecdote. I meet constituents that he's helped along the way. We'll come on to it later, but obviously we talked about me fundraising, and I have set up a tribute page after he died. And there's stories on there of people that he's helped along the way, just Joe Public, and it's gone.
That's given me goosebumps.
Yeah, unstated, but it's lovely. And it just, for me, it's confirming everything that he did and what I thought of him. But it keeps his legacy alive.
Do you know, as you were talking, I wrote down the word legacy.
And it's just lovely. Every now and then I can share with the kids a story that I've just heard about their dad, and it's lovely. It's absolutely lovely.
So we might come back again, but we probably should get to the critical bit here. I'm assuming he was fairly healthy, because he must have been to run at life at the pace he ran at it.
I mean, I've got my Fitbit on. He had his own watch. He used to do 10,000, 15,000 steps a day, sometimes 20,000 steps if it was a busy day. We've got a treadmill at home. He used to run on the treadmill. He didn't
Where
drink.
did this guy find the time? Did he sleep?
Well, yeah, he did, but he was. I used to irritate me. The head went on the pillow, and he
Straight
was
out,
asleep
yeah.
in bottles. I don't know how he
those
did
people.
it, but he did. And I'd be there for hours listening, not snoring, but to him breathing, and it's just like, how?
I've got to have, the right temperature, meditation,
Oh,
complete
totally.
darkness.
I slept last night with the window open because I was so hot.
Yeah, that might be an age thing for us, Cathy. So when did he start to show concerns about his health? Because
Through his political career, he ended up becoming, he worked for David Cameron in the shadow government as securities minister. And then obviously over time, the Tories got elected and then he became a government minister. And at the time it was Theresa May was the prime minister and they had worked together previously in the Home Office when she was Home Secretary, and then she became Prime Minister, and she promoted James to Northern Ireland Secretary.
Big job, that one.
Yeah. So we were over there. We as a family James used to go 2-3 times a week, and as a family, we used to try and join him once a month. Which we used to fund ourselves, and I'd drag the kids off and I'd be looking at EasyJet trying to find the cheap flights and whatever. And we were over there, and one Sunday we'd been invited to somebody's house for Sunday lunch, somebody we'd not met before, and we were having dinner. The kids were, I think I had a couple of them at secondary school, one at sort of junior school at the time, and you're in a total stranger's house, and you're very conscious that you want the kids to behave. So sometimes these things aren't completely relaxed as a mother when you've got 3 kids, but we were having a lovely time, and he just went off to the bathroom, and I just thought, oh, you've been a little while. And I came back and I said, are you all right? And he said, no, I'm fine. And anyhow, we carried on dinner, and then we got in the car. And also what comes with being Northern Ireland Secretary as well is protection officers. So you're not in the car. When we left, we're not in the car on our own. We're being driven around, in effect, with protection officers.
An armoured car, I imagine.
And an armed car. So it wasn't until we got home later that day, back to Hillsborough Castle where we were staying, because that's the other thing, we were able to stay at Hillsborough Castle while we were there. He just said to me, I coughed up blood earlier, by the way. And that's why I was in the bathroom a little while. And I went, oh, okay. And he said, so I'm going to book an appointment. And he said, actually, can you deal with it? So sure enough, I mean, I was kind of PA to the personal world. So we made a doctor's appointment, and his GP was absolutely incredible, and sent him off for an X-ray and did some blood tests. And that came back inconclusive. And then he said, okay, I think maybe we need to do a CT scan. And again, that came back inconclusive. And he had only literally coughed up the one bit of blood at this stage. Perfectly fine, not, sort of voice was normal, still working. And actually, they were going through the Brexit negotiations at the time, so he was doing stupid hours. And again, I can remember being at an event and being pulled away at 11 o'clock at night for James and Theresa May to have to go rewrite drafts of papers that Theresa was then going to take off to Brussels the following day.
People think the life of MP is all glamour and, socialising. This sounds really intense.
Well, I was sitting in an office. I got used to taking my book with me. So I was sitting in some office in Whitehall in the middle of wherever, this corridor, not really knowing where the loo was. And I was there for about 3-4 hours till about 3 or 4 in the morning. And I was sat reading a book. And every now and then someone would come in, do you want another coffee? Yeah, I'll have a coffee. I didn't know where he was, but he was down the corridor somewhere having negotiations or discussions and rewriting stuff. And then we literally, somebody said to him, oh, aren't you going to deliver this sort of document? And he said, no, Teresa's going. But actually what we did is we then went up to Guys and St Thomas's the next day, and he was having further scans and imagery and what have you. So he basically he went from X-ray to PET scan to CT scan, so then having the camera, the oncology down the throat. and they found a tiny little lesion on the top right part of his lung. Um, and that obviously was
That
the
was the
start
beginning.
of his lung cancer. And he finally got the news just before his 50th birthday at the
Oh,
end of December.
happy birthday.
Yeah, happy birthday. And he had to stand down as Northern Ireland secretary. And the ironic thing was we'd had a family holiday planned because my brother lives in Australia. So we were all off on family to Australia for the first time in years. And all the cousins were getting excited to see each other. My mum and dad had already flown out ahead of us. We had to wait for the school holidays because we just had that minutiae sort of 10-day window. And when we were coming back, James was supposed to be doing some more talks on the devolved parliament to try and get things up and running in Northern Ireland. And that had all been planned. And then he got this diagnosis, and the consultant said to us, and they knew we were going away. And my question is, can he fly? And he said, yes, he can fly. He said, but go away and have a fantastic holiday and make the memories. And the pair of us thought, okay, this is really bad. But
That sounds so dramatic. And as you're
well,
talking,
we
sorry,
still hadn't quite had the diagnosis then. So we then kind of we flew back on the 2nd of January, saw the consultant on the 3rd, and he confirmed it was lung cancer. But then we were in this awful hiatus of we've got to sit down and tell the children. And they kind of knew, we told them there was issues before, but we told them we didn't know the story, which we didn't.
Mm-hmm.
We actually went away on holiday with the kids and us knowing that there was a potential something wrong, but not knowing what, and potentially it could be cancer. But we asked the kids not to say anything, and they kept our trust, which is, I think, is an incredibly hard thing to tell your kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost feel terrible about asking them, but it felt the right thing to do at the time because we didn't want to blight the holiday and everyone have this sort of cloud descend upon them and it all be about what if. We kind of wanted it to be as normal as possible. So they'd obviously clocked that we were going to hospital, and every time we went to the hospital, we were going with protection officers. So when we had the diagnosis, we got in the car, like the protection officers waited outside. We've gone into consultant's room. He's given us this devastating blow. We then got in the car and we couldn't talk. I mean, most couples, if you get information like that, you can go to the coffee shop and have a coffee, or you get in the car or whatever, and at least you can scream and shout and talk about it. We just had to come out looking stony faced, get in the car, carry on as normal. It backed onto a school run. We had to go and collect the kids, so we picked all the kids up. We then came home and we had a normal evening. We got on and, did homework, teas and whatever. And it wasn't about to 8:30, 9 o'clock at night. We were finally on our own, and the pair of us could actually sit and discuss it and what to do next and where to go. And they were talking about operation dates. But then you've got to remember he was, Secretary of State for Northern Ireland. This impacted on his job. So the first person he phoned was Theresa May to say, Prime Minister, to say, I don't think I can carry on doing your job, and had to explain to her. She then realised he was going to have to stand out, or he said, I'm going to have to stand out and I can't do the talks that we've just planned to do. So you're going to have to recruit somebody else, which then means a cabinet reshuffle.
Oh my God.
And it all becomes public. It's not like you can just take a back seat.
These are all things that nobody would ever consider, aren't they?
So this had to be sort of choreographed. So it turned out for Theresa, the best day was to do it on the 8th of January, which was his birthday. Oh. So he actually stood down from a job he loved. He absolutely adored being Northern Ireland Secretary on his birthday, on his 50th birthday. And it was all over the news. But so fundamentally, my brother, the minute we left Australia, him and his family went off skiing to America. My mum stayed on in Australia, but she was travelling home, and this news was breaking on the 8th of January.
Oh, God.
My mum, so I had to My mum landed, and I phoned her and said, "Oh, hi, Mum, how are you?" This is on the 7th, the night before. She landed at 10, 11 o'clock at night. And she said, "Oh, I'm fine." She said, "We're just in the taxi on our way home." And I said, "Well, can we have a conversation when you get back?" And she's like, "No, I'm just so tired. I've been travelling." And I went, "I get it. We need to have a chat." And she's like, "No, we'll talk in the morning." And I thought, she can't switch on the news and hear this for the first time. I then, because of the time zones, I texted my brother or emailed my brother just saying, "I don't know whether you'll hear this in America. I don't know whether it will land that far. We've had a lovely time with you, but something we didn't tell you while we were away with you is X, Y, and Z, and it's going to hit the news tomorrow. We tell you." So,
And what are the kids? How old are the kids at this point?
so my that's a very good question. I can't remember everything. So
No. I don't know how old mine are today, if that helps. Roughly.
yeah,
I can give you an approximation.
I would say my eldest was about 13. Maybe 14, and then the next one would have been two years younger, and the baby would have been sort of 9ish, 8 or 9ish.
I like that your 8 or 9-year-old was still the baby. I've got a 7-year-old that's still the baby.
Oh, he's now 18, and he's still the baby.
Still the baby, of course, of course. So those are pretty tough ages to be dealing with this as well. I'm thinking all that sort of teen awkwardness, and then having this sort of.
Well, it was all over the news. So, you these days you get the sort of breakfast TV, and it was all over that. It was all over the lunchtime news. It was all over the 6 o'clock news. It was 10 o'clock news. It was everywhere. You just
could be why I recognise his face, isn't it?
Yeah,
I've absorbed it by osmosis.
Yeah, and he was in the, he'd often be sitting on the front bench next to whatever prime minister was in situ at the time when it was obviously the Tories in power. So yeah, he was the spokesperson, and he did every media round. There was a joke. David Cameron started it off: if there's a problem, send James Brokenshire to go fix it. He was trusted. He did the news rounds most days.
To have.
Yeah, and Theresa did the same, and so did Boris. So they often used to send him out if there was an issue they wanted.
But then this becomes a sort of poison chalice, doesn't it? Because then he's well known, which then means that it's interesting to the media. It's causing a cabinet reshuffle. And I'm kind of thinking about this man who has worked so hard to get into this position of power, to do some good.
That was his driving force. He just wanted to make a difference. He wasn't interested in the notoriety of being politics. Everyone used to say to him, "You're going to be prime minister one day," and he'd just go, "No, I don't want it. Cathy would kill me. But at the same time, I'm not interested. All I want to do is make a difference and help people." And because of that then led him to get promoted, but it wasn't the reason for.
In many ways, it's reassuring that good people do get promoted in Parliament,
well,
right?
When he actually stopped being a lawyer and became an MP, he took a massive pay cut.
I bet he did.
Massive salary decrease for us as a family.
And in this moment, your privacy. You said that you've got this terrible news and you can't even talk about it with a driver in the car.
No.
So in that moment, the day before, almost, you're quite private. Yeah. And the very next day, it's broadcast around the world. Yeah. Now, my situation was very different. Ben wasn't famous, but the nature of his death meant that there was media interest. Yes. So my mum was walking into the town that I lived in, and there was one of the A boards with the local paper.
Yes.
And my mum sort of fell to the floor. I wasn't with her at the time, but she was living this with me. She was by my side. But something about that kind of public ownership really literally floored her. And I can only imagine what that must have been like for you and for him, because for a man who has engaged with the media through work and, you have a relationship with the media, to then have it, to become almost like an animal in the zoo, it must have been so frightening.
Yeah, I mean, we were as strong as a unit, and you kind of get used to your life being exposed in the press. He was used to it. We were used to it. So it's kind of, for you, it was alien. For us, you kind of got used to it.
I'm just thinking it's your most vulnerable moment, isn't it? And everybody knows about it.
Everybody knows about it. And of course, the minute something hits the news, it's your telephone. You know that it's hit because both phones are going 10 to the dozen. People are messaging, texting and what have you. But again, when he became Northern Ireland Secretary, our phones went ballistic. When he, every time there was a reshuffle and he got promoted and had a different role or something, we were kind of used to it. For us, it was trying to tell the family before it became public property. And then, of course, obviously, once we told, James's parents had passed away. He was an only child, so he didn't have immediate families, but he had aunties and cousins to tell as well, which we told. And then there's only so many people you can tell before it gets out there, and then you just have to wait for everyone else to come and message you.
I remember posting on Facebook because although it felt quite vulgar, it was the easiest way to tell a lot of people a lot of news. And much like you don't want the phone going all the time. You feel very overwhelmed by it all. Now, just kind of go backing a little bit. So I'm thinking, so the initial scans and things, they were inconclusive. So that's not brilliant, but it's not awful.
Yeah.
And then they find a mass, which is very, very small.
Tiny, millimetres. Absolutely millimetres.
So you're probably, and I'm making assumptions here and kind of hypothesizing, but I'm assuming that you're thinking that this is going to be rough, but we're going to survive it.
And that's what we were being told by all the consultants. And actually, we were. He had the top part of his lobe removed. He made a full recovery within 3 months.
Wow.
And because he was so fit, and that's what I did. The minute I knew that we had the diagnosis, I think he had the operation on something like the 17th of Jan. So we had about 2 weeks once we confirmed operation days. And I said, look, you're already fit, but we need to get you as fit as possible. So we used to go out walking every day, come rain or shine. We went walking every day. And actually, he was in hospital, for 2 or 3 days, and he came home. And although he stood down from his role as Northern Ireland Secretary, which meant that the protection officers were no longer needed and they were going to stand down and obviously protect somebody else, there was an overlap of a window of about 2 or 3 weeks, because James was saying, look, you're saying to me I need to be protected. I'm now having an operation and I'm now at my most vulnerable. I can't even run or walk, and you're just literally withdrawing everything. So luckily we had protection officers for another 2 or 3 weeks. And again, we went out walking every day. And that was brilliant, because when you've had your lungs tampered with, for want of a Western expression, you don't know how far you can walk. You don't know whether you can go 100 yards down the road, whether you can walk 2 minutes, 3 minutes or 10 minutes. But it meant we could just keep going, and then the car would be there to pick us up and take us home.
Oh, of course. Yes. I see. Yeah, that's handy.
Yeah. So whereas if it was anybody else, you think, well, I've got to get back. So, but I can remember one of the nurses saying to us at one of the sessions, she said, we had one lady the other week, she said, and after a month or 3 months, she could walk 2 miles. We were so pleased. Well, James was doing that fairly early on and before the 3 months, because he was fit. And it was January, it was cold, it was wet, and he was frightened of getting a chill, much like the weather we've had this weekend. And I live in the
You're not
London
far from me, are you?
No, so I live near Blue Water. So I said, right, we're off to Blue Water. I said, because that's what the Americans do in the summer. When it's hot, they go to a mall to get the air conditioning. I said, we're just doing it in reverse. So we went to the shopping mall, and we used to laugh, because I would be like the pace setter walking, and James would be walking behind me, and then we'd be followed by 2 protection officers. And I used to
Did
say,
they carry your shopping bags, Cathy?
No, they didn't. They never did. But I used to say, if the security guards are watching the 4 of us just roaming, and we used to do he could do a circle of it, and then we'd go upstairs and he'd do the next circle upstairs, and then we'd come down, and we'd do however far he could do. And then in the end, I said to him, stairs became, obviously inclines were harder, and he was sort of getting his confidence up and walking on the flat, because it knocked his confidence, if anything. And he kind of got his confidence back, and he thought, yes, I can do this. And I said, right, so now we're changing it up. I said, and Bluewater's got lots of stairs, hasn't it? So I said, right, we're going to go up every stair and every escalator now. So we did that. And he always says, he thanked me so much for pushing him, because I'm a bit of a walker and I enjoy it, and he did as well. But I'm like, no, you can't just sit there. We've got to get up. We've got to get moving. And I think I took hold of what one of the nurses said to me. She said, you recover quicker if you're fitter, and actually getting the blood pumping around your body and circulation means you're less likely to get infection. So I took that, and I suppose you have to grab hold of something, don't you?
And that's something that you can control. You can't control what the cancer's doing, you can't control what the surgeon's doing, but you've been told if you're fitter, you've got a better chance of surviving. So as his wife, as his partner, as the person who loves him most, you've tried to make this happen. I think it's admirable.
Yeah.
Also, my friend told me the other day she walks around Bluewater when it's cold. I never knew it was a thing.
Yeah, no, well, I didn't know it was a thing. There you go. Clearly is. So he made a full recovery. He got back into the cabinet within 3 months.
I was going to say, how was he still working? Because he sounds like a man that wouldn't do well with not working.
So he didn't. He was a workaholic. So in that 3 month recovery, he obviously didn't have a portfolio. He wasn't a cabinet minister. His constituency office helped look after all the constituents and all their issues, and his neighbouring colleagues around him and his close friends, if it was a subject matter that it needed an MP rather than James's work colleagues or people that work for him, they would pick up the slack. So constituents still it was seamless for them. They knew no different. Obviously they all knew, but they knew other people were dealing with it and their issues and concerns weren't
so the
there.
kind of continuation of care is there.
You put on the evening news, and that was his job. So you can't escape from it in that respect, because there's always something on the news. But that's also keeping you interested and in the loop. He was, Theresa May was at the end of the phone. We were going through the Brexit stuff, as I was saying. So they were able to talk and converse about that.
Oh, if walls could talk on that, I bet.
And various colleagues would phone and tell him what's happening. So he, as I say, he made a full recovery, and Theresa then made him immigration minister. Housing minister. So he became housing minister. And it was not long after Grenfell had happened. So, and obviously that was quite a difficult scenario to deal with and to speed up with. And then it's a very sensitive, hard issue. So he kind of was back into it.
Real hit the road running stuff. He's not gone back into a nice cushy desk pen pushing job, has he? He's gone right back in. And how did he manage that with because he must have felt poorly as well?
No, I would say by the 3 months he was fine.
He was fine. Wow.
So we went to a very good friend of ours, had a burn supper. Actually, she was an MP as well, and she's a Scottish lady, and she invited us to her burn supper, and we still had the protection officers, so it was very early on. And James, I said to her, I hope you and James, she said to me, I hope you and James can still make it. She said, obviously, I understand if you can't. And I said, I'd still love to come. But as I say, it really knocked his confidence. And he said, he doesn't know if he can make it. And then I sat down with him and I said, look, I get you're frightened. You don't know if you're going to get tired or if you're going to need to get home and if you've got enough energy. I said, but I'm sure you'd love to see all your friends that are going to be there. And I said, we've got the protection officers. It's not like you've got to walk down to the end of the road to get on the train. You've got to wait for a train, stand in the cold. You've then got to get out and catch a tube or whatever. And then we've got to walk to the venue. I said, you'll literally get a lift from the front door here all the way to the door of where the event was happening. And I said, the minute you can't cope, you will click your fingers.
And we go home.
And we go home. I said, so if we only go for 20 minutes, I said, that's better than sitting in all evening thinking, I wonder if I should have gone, and see how you go. Well, we ended up staying nearly 3 hours, and we didn't stay for the Acaili dancing, but we stayed for everything else. And he had a lovely time. And again, he kept saying, I'm so glad you made me do it. I'm so glad. And that then gave him confidence to do everything else that then led on. But he weaned himself. He didn't like the morphine that he was on because it made him feel woozy. So he dealt with the pain, and then he was like coming off the painkillers. And then Teresa said, "I'd like to get you back in. Do you think you could do it?" And he kept saying, "I don't know if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it." And I said, "Look, ball's in your court." And he decided to go for it. And I think it then gave him something to live for, if that makes sense, and get involved in and park the illness as a secondary.
And he was a young man, wasn't he, as well? He was a young man at the peak of his career.
Yeah. And we, he lived cancer-free for another 3 years, virtually. It came back in COVID times.
Oh, no, COVID as well.
Yeah. So, but we had all the teams around us from before, and he'd stayed in contact. So very early on when he was diagnosed, he knew he had to, it was another cause that he could help. So he got in contact with Roy Castle Lung Cancer Foundation because there was somebody there that he knew. And he became a spokesman for them. He spoke about lung cancer for the first time on the floor of House of Commons and raised a debate and the topic there. So it was just another cause and another thing that he could do.
And was part of that because of this idea that we have, like I mentioned at the beginning, that we all think if we're non-smokers that lung cancer won't affect us. And Roy Castle was sort of the first public figure to say, I'm not, and he sort of said it might have been to do with working in smoky clubs and things, didn't he? I'm sure I remember. And I'm just having a quick look, and the kind of from what I can discern from this is it's massively underfunded, lung cancer, and it perhaps because of its association with tobacco. Do you think? I'm guessing.
So fundamentally, if you've got lungs, you can get lung cancer. Yeah. So it's smoking, non-smoking, it's irrelevant. About 25% of people nationally that have never smoked or are non-smokers can get lung cancer.
Gosh, that's huge, isn't it?
And, whether you get cancer, whether you smoked or not, yes, you can get it. And it can be smoking, it can be environmental, it can be genetic. What makes somebody...
It's shitty luck.
It's just shitty luck, yeah. Per death, it raises the least amount of funds per death of any cancers. And it is the biggest cancer killer. Yeah. So,
and do you think that is because of stigma around it? Because people don't know? And
fundamentally, it's been stigma. It's not necessary. It's also some people that have smoked may think it's my own fault.
Yeah.
And I kind of, it feels wrong saying this, but I kind of say it's not a sexy cancer. Because, and most probably it is because of the stigma, yes. But we don't vilify somebody for having type 2 diabetes and saying you've had a bad diet.
It's fear, don't you? Though I think it's fear, and if there's something to blame for it happening, we then think, oh well, if I don't do that, I'm safe from it. And I think that's people. Much like grief itself, people tend to recoil from sometimes taking their responsibility, sometimes from just accepting that life can be a bit shit sometimes, and good people don't deserve the things that happen.
Yeah. So, and fundamentally, it's the biggest killer. So that by definition gives it a bit. There's more numbers to play with, shall we say, statistic-wise. And then, breast cancer, we're all told to check for lumps and symptoms. And again, with prostate cancer, James coughed up one bit of blood.
And that was it.
There was no other symptom.
And
something I've learned in the last 3.5 years is your lungs don't have pain receptors. So if you run up a hill and we get out of breath and we can feel, it's your rib cage around your lungs, and that's what you can feel. But your actual lungs don't have pain receptors. And you can't look inside your lungs and go, oh yeah.
You can't have a little prod, can you? No.
Yeah. So it can go undiagnosed for a long time. And often when you do get symptoms, it can already be a latter stage. And a lot of people that get diagnosed with lung cancer, they've gone to A&E for something else. And they have an x-ray or something of their torso, or they start explaining symptoms that they don't think are any. I mean, you can get back pain, shoulder pain, clubbing of hands. These are all symptoms of lung cancer, but the average person doesn't know that. And it's not necessarily, oh, I've got a pain in my shoulder and my back, I've got lung
It must be
cancer.
my lungs.
Yeah.
And that's really interesting, because you're right, we do, particularly you get to a certain age, you have your mammograms or your smears, or, prostate cancer tests. And some of these cancers are, uncomfortable, things like bowel cancer as well.
Well, again, and you think, I mean, traditionally there is more of an obvious symptom with bowel cancer.
But I'm thinking of John's wife. She had back pain. She didn't automatically think, oh, that's my bowel.
Yeah.
It was her back. And this idea that something could be doing damage to us and we don't know, I mean, that is scary, and you can see why people are afraid of it. So after he's got sort of the all clear, or in remission, did they call it, or did they actually give you all clear? Yeah. And then it came back. I mean, it must have done, because he's not here.
So at the point of him having the operation, they took the lesion away and analysed it, and they've still got the samples now. But there were no known markers to thwart the type of cancer he had. It was a very aggressive form of lung cancer. And they got rid of it all. So he didn't need chemo. But James and I both knew it was going to come back at some point, because it was, fundamentally, when he first got diagnosed, I knew I wasn't going to grow old with him. And it's a conversation I never properly had with him, but he often used to say to me, if I can get to my 60s and the kids are independent. So, and I used to say, don't talk like that. But we never really had the conversation in depth. And I never spoke to him about what do you want to do for your funeral or things like that, because I didn't want him to think I'd given up on him. But fundamentally, I knew.
And I guess it makes it real as well, doesn't it?
Yeah, fundamentally, I knew that I wasn't going to grow old with him. And as I said to you, it came back in COVID times. He coughed up a bit of blood again, and he said, I've just coughed up blood. So we went back down the route of, we knew all the people to go and see. And this time they took the whole lung away from him.
So he was left with a very big operation.
And again, I hadn't realised this, but apparently we only use 60% of our lungs. And people like your husband, Ben, he most probably would have built up his lung capacity and used 100% for his diving or what have you. The average person only uses about 60% of your lungs. So initially, when they were talking about taking his lung away, we're like, oh, how do you cope? And they're like, no, that other lung a lot of it will step up. It will step up to the job, and the average person doesn't use the capacity to fall anyhow, unless they're
getting a full biology lesson today.
So we had a whole barrage of tests again. I don't think timelines slip really because of COVID, but there was that added pressure of, oh my God, if I get COVID and I've only got the one, what does that mean? Or afterwards. But again, when they took the lump away, or the tumour away, and analysed it, it was the same cancer, but there were still no markers 3 years later. But they gave him adjuvant chemo this time. We don't know how to thwart it, but it's obviously come back. So this time we'll pump you full of chemo and see what happens. So and again, he got told on his 53rd birthday, you've got cancer. So yeah,
we should not have had any appointments in January.
No, repetition yet again. So he had the whole lung removed. We had chemo, and I can remember my birthday's in March, and I can remember him saying to me around my birthday, and we were housebound as everybody else was because they were in lockdown, and he ordered a whole load of gifts to the door, and we had afternoon tea, and we had cakes and present after presents and balloons and whatever. And I can remember running upstairs crying, thinking, you're not going to be here next year. But I don't know whether he knew that. but he laid on the works, but he was saying, when I'm better, this will happen, and when I'm better. But by our wedding anniversary, which was mid-April, it was only 3 weeks later or a month later, he was a little bit more pessimistic about his future, because I was then, he's like, oh, I don't know. And I'm like, no, we're going to do this. When you're better, we'll go up and do this. And he wasn't quite as confident then. So
and that deterioration was quite quick, and particularly in terms of how his emotional state was. Because what when you can maintain some degree of hope and optimism, obviously your mental state's better. And when that starts to slip away, and I'm also thinking, you describe him as very sociable, a workaholic. And so not only is he having surgery, but lockdown would have meant that you're quite isolated as well. Were your kids with you, or were they off doing their own thing?
No, they were with us. So in lockdown, the constituency emails were through.
Of
course. Can imagine. There were people stranded around the world. He was also, James was quite instrumental, ironically. The undertaker told me this afterwards, once he died. He was very helpful sorting out stuff for the undertaking world, if that's an expression, I don't know.
Yeah.
And trying to sort stuff out for them. And obviously he was still key he was immigration minister as well at that stage. So his workload was astronomical, and he used to get up at sort of 8 o'clock in the morning and be sat in the study morning, noon and night dealing with whatever. And he would finish about 11 o'clock in the evening, and I would just go in with bits of food. I mean, for me, I loved lockdown because it wasn't like that every day. I mean, it was like that initially when we went into lockdown in 2019. And over the course of the ins and outs of lockdowns, things got better and there were different issues. But for us as a family, for the first time, we had evening meals together, all five of us.
The world slowed down for you.
Yeah, the world slowed down, and we were all here, and I loved it. And I actually think in reflection, it was lovely that we got that time together, and it wasn't normality for everybody else, but it was kind of what we perceived as normal.
And especially with hindsight as well, being able to think you had that time together as a unit of 5, which, he could have been working abroad, he could have been in Northern Ireland. There's so many ifs and buts that could have prevented you being together in that time.
Yeah.
Now, I know it's a tricky one, and I know your children are older and they're sentient beings, so I won't ask you to talk too much about them. But just if you don't mind, how do you sit them down and tell them that Dad's cancer's back?
Do you know what we did? And I think in between the bouts of illnesses, the kids said to us they didn't think we were always being honest with them, and we weren't not telling them information, but we didn't necessarily always say if we had an appointment at the hospital, because it would be in the day when they were at school. But the bit, and again, I now understand this a lot more since he's died. The bit I hadn't appreciated is they're going to school in the local community, and people are asking them questions because he's high profile and in the public eye, and them not having all the information made it harder for them. But obviously he got re-diagnosed. We sat them down and said that, and my daughter actually turned around and said to him, "You're not going to die, are you, Dad?" Which broke my heart. But again, I couldn't, that was stony face. And he went, "Well, I hope not." But no, we were just honest with them, because they'd asked us that in those intervening years. We just literally told them everything that we knew. But who knows what a cancer journey is going to be. I mean,
no, and that is the thing, you don't have the answers for them.
I don't have the answers, so all you can say is this is all we know, this is what we'd like, and this is what we know.
But honesty is so important, especially when you're dealing with children or young adults, because they're not as dumb as they look, are they? They are very intuitive. They know when things aren't right. And I have shared this anecdote before, but you can hear it again. I said to my children that the police were at the door because of the dog. I just said it because I didn't know what else to say. Well, it took probably a year to rebuild that trust, because on the day their dad had died, I'd lied to them. how could they believe anything I said?
Yeah.
And it was a relatively small white lie, but you can see how it sort of snowballs.
Yeah.
So when did things sort of take a turn for the worse? Take me back to that time.
I can remember in the January when he first got diagnosed, I went to see a friend of mine and I said, the cancer's back. And I just had a sixth sense. I said, he's not going to be here by October half term. And my friend said, no, you can't say that. And I went, no, I know it. I know it. And in the August, we went on holiday with some friends to Lake District. And he was umming and ahhing whether he should go. He's like, I never really did long distance driving because he always did, and I didn't need to. And he said, I don't know, it's a long way to go, and I don't know whether I should go or not. And I said, look, ball's in your court, but if we cancel, the kids are going to be disappointed. And I said, if we go, we're with friends anyhow, and if you're having a hard day and you're feeling tired, well, you just have to sleep, and the kids and I can spend time with the friends. And so we ended up going, and I said to him, look, I promise you, if anything happens, I'll drive. Mm-hmm. I actually drove up there, and we were with friends, and we did do stuff, and we also have some friends that live there as well. So there was like kind of 3 families intermingling and doing stuff. And a couple of times he said, no, I can't do that, and he'd pull out. So, and I'd also clocked he was getting very tired, but I'd also clocked he wasn't using his arm properly. And then my eldest at the time was just about to start university in Edinburgh. And he said, why don't we go and have a look at Edinburgh University? Because she never got to see the university because it all got chosen in lockdown. So she never had the tours that everybody else would normally go when they go to university. He said, let's go up and show her where she's staying and, where everything is. So we did that, and we drove up there. And then we literally we'd driven up there. We'd been there about 10 minutes. We'd seen the halls of residence. And then we said, let's go and get some lunch, and then we'll explore Edinburgh and the rest of the campus. And he was driving at this stage. And all of a sudden he screamed and went, and I went, what? And he went, my arm. And we were in a dual carriageway, in the middle of Edinburgh. So we wouldn't have been going fast, but it was dual carriage in the one-way streets, worming in and out. And he went, my arm, and immediately grabbed hold of his arm. And I grabbed hold of the steering wheel. And I said, well, we can't stop here. We were in the fast lane. I said, you do the feet and I'll do the hands, and we'll get over to the curb. So we got over to the curb, and I got him out the car, and we all got out the car, and he's like, my arm really hurts. And he said, let's go and eat. And he kind of calmed down, and he said, let's go for get some lunch. And my daughter said, if your arm is that bad, she said, Dad needs to go to hospital. Dad, you've got to go to hospital. So we then drove to hospital and never really saw the rest of Edinburgh. And I left, bizarrely, because we'd gone out for the day, and when there's a family of 5, going for coffees and cakes and snacks takes money. Mm-hmm. And sometimes not everybody's happy with the option. So I'd packed a flask, because we'd gone away on a sort of holiday with other people. I'd got flasks, and we bought a pint of milk from the petrol station, and I had tea bags, and we had mugs, and I had crisps and cakes and stuff.
I want you in a crisis.
So we parked up, and I said to them, because it was lockdown, we weren't all allowed in the hospital. They didn't really want me there. And I said to the kids, my eldest was going off to university. She was 18, and the other 2 would have been 16 and 15. So I kind of said to them, or 14, I kind of said to them, look, you're going to have to sit in the car. I don't know how long this is going to take. You've got food and snacks there. I gave them a load of cash. I said, somewhere on this hospital, there will be a Marks and Spencer's. Go and get whatever you fancy, and go get the coffee, find a Starbucks, whatever. We've got each other on our phones, and I'll keep you posted. So I sat in with James, and we were basically at the hospital for about 6 hours that day. And I spent the time between sitting with James, sitting with the kids, and I can remember saying to the kids in the car, they don't remember me saying this, but I can remember saying to them, I think this is the start of the end. And fundamentally what had happened is the cancer had metastasized by that stage, and it had eaten his bone and his arm had broken. So him
my God.
him
Are you
turning
serious?
him turning the steering wheel, it broke his arm.
Oh my God. That's awful.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
Jesus. And yet between you managed to park.
Yeah.
What teamwork.
Yeah.
So what did they say at the hospital? Did they tell you there and then that that's what had happened?
Yeah. And they wanted to keep him in, but equally they said, really, you should get back to London for your London team to be dealing with this. If we take you in here, you're going to be stuck up here. So
in Edinburgh as well. It's not like it's Kent, is it?
No. So that meant what we did is we left the hospital, and in the car, obviously we told the kids and everything. And in the car, I said, we were due to be on holiday for another couple of days. And I said, we just got to get back. I said, so I want to pack the car up tonight. It was pitch black. I said, I want to pack up the car tonight because I wasn't used to driving long distances on motorways and stuff. So I said to the kids, we'll leave Dad in the bedroom. I said, and if you guys can all help pack up all your bits and help me pack up the car, and I'm quite organised, but it just got thrown in that day because it was pitch black. It was pouring with rain and pitch black. And I said, and then we'll get up at silly o'clock in the morning when it's daylight, and I'll start getting on the roads and driving when it's not as busy. So that's what we did. We packed up the car, and the where we were staying in this Airbnb, the lady said, oh, what do you want for breakfast? And I said, oh, I'm really sorry, we're going to have to leave early. My husband's broken his arm. And I didn't say any more than that. So we're just going to get up and go in the daylight tomorrow. And she's like, oh, okay. So I think she gave us a few bits of snacks to eat in the car and what have you. And we then drove home. And then the next day went back up to the hospital, or even that day. And that's when they confirmed that it had metastasized, and he then started radiotherapy as well. And obviously it confirmed that the adjuvant chemo hadn't touched the sides basically and hadn't helped.
Is he still working at this point?
Oh, still working.
Yeah, of course he is.
He did stand down from work, and he was arming and ahhing, I need to stand down, not from his MP role, but he was head of security for the country.
You slipped that in an hour and 2 minutes. Head of security for the country. What a
James actually was dealt when Theresa May was Home Secretary under David Cameron, and we had the Olympics. James delivered the security for the whole of the Olympics for 2012. So he just said, I can't be doing this role, and people were helping him. I mean, during lockdown, we had government papers being delivered to the house for him to read, and then they'd get taken away because obviously he couldn't go to the office to read them. We had extra security. If he needed to do various phone calls, teams of people would come in, and this is a whole time when he's vulnerable, and you've got to be careful of who you let in your house, but people had to come in and do special stuff. I don't quite know.
I'm guessing make sure the lines are secure and stuff, because you're not kind of high risk of being bugged, wouldn't you?
Yeah, exactly.
In a spy film.
Yeah. So, and then we'd have to have, like, the people that drove over with the equipment would be sitting on the patio outside, come rain or shine.
Yeah, they couldn't come in for a cup of tea, could they?
Well, they had a cup of tea outside. They weren't allowed in, and every now and then it's like, can I come to the toilet? And it's like, yes, you can come in and use the toilet. And they're like, I've got to clean the toilet now.
Yeah, because you must have been so terrified of bringing COVID into the house. Yeah. My mum and dad lived with me when COVID happened, and my mum I remember making me Dettol and I buy a lot of Amazon. I'm really naughty, but she would make me Dettol every package and leave it in the garage for 48 hours.
Well, we did all of that. We did leave it in the porch for 24 hours. I mean,
and now we know that it doesn't transmit that way, but we were all just doing the best we could, weren't we?
Good, yeah. Only just is, if you sort of say to our children, our grandchildren and great-grandchildren who used to come, this is what we did.
I just hope I'm alive for the film about it. You know, there's going to be like a really kind of intensive film that tells us what really happened. Now,
Yeah.
I know that James died, the death anniversary, for want of a better word,
Yeah.
was quite recent because it was when we were supposed to speak last time, wasn't it? Was that?
No. He died October the 7th, but it was his birthday when we were due
That
to
was it,
speak.
of course. Of course, January, yes, of course. So your prediction then, you said
Yeah.
to your friend that you had this kind of weird sixth sense that he was going to die in October.
No, not in October, but he would be around
For
by the
October half
October
term.
half term. He died 2 weeks before.
So you're a bit of a witch then.
Thanks for that. I think my kids might confirm that one.
Yeah. You don't ask mine about me. But that weird sixth sense, I didn't have it at all. I mean, I made some stupid throwaway comments in the playground about, Ben died tomorrow. I wouldn't know how to pay the bills. But that's the sort of throwaway comment I might have made anyway. But I reckon there's about a 50-50 split with people that have this innate, when they die suddenly, they have this innate kind of feeling that something's wrong. And people that have these kind of predictions about what will happen. And who knows if it's chance, but that, I'm trying to say this more articulately, but how did you then, you must have felt a bit like you had this kind of the spectre, the sky waiting over you. What did life look like during this period? So you've gone away in the May, was it you say, the May to Scotland?
No, it was August half term.
August. So, oh gosh.
August, bank holiday.
So that's, oh wow, okay, that's quick.
He was still working, so he wasn't a government minister. He might have stood down as a government minister by that stage. And again, he kept saying, I'm thinking about doing it. I went and did a food shop and my phone went ballistic. So I came home and I went, I know you've resigned because my phone is going mad. But my daughter then went off to university at the beginning of September. And we were going on family together and we were going on the train, but he decided not to come. And my mum and dad came and stayed with him. I then went and took my daughter, and my son came up and we took her up to Edinburgh, but I didn't want to drive. So we went on the train and we took everything in trolley dolly bags and what have you. And
I went to Edinburgh on the train beginning of January, actually, funnily enough.
Yeah. And we took everything up there. My mum and dad love the fact that was kind of their last proper weekend with him. And because I wasn't there, lots of friends came in to see him and visit him, and they all did some lovely things with him. So he was kept busy. But although he'd broken his arm, he still was working, still dealing with constituency stuff. We also, one of his former constituency, he was MP for Old Bexley and Sidcup, but he was also, prior to that, an MP for Hornchurch, and one of the Hornchurch constituents. It was a high-profile case. Very sadly, died in a speedboat. She'd gone on a date and fell out of the boat and hit her head. The Brown family, and the guy who took her on the date, he fled the country.
Yeah, I do remember.
James, through his securities and immigration, had been trying to get him back into the country. So it kind of started off as a story of a local constituent, but then when he was in his role as securities and immigration minister, it became his government role to try and get this guy back. And he had come back at this stage, and ITV were doing a documentary. And the Brown family said, you need to talk to James Brokenshire because he's been instrumental in getting this result. So I came back. I'd gone to see a secondary school, a sixth form school with my son that James didn't go to. And I came back and I said, no, it was on the Wednesday. I think it was on the Wednesday. And I said to him, I was trying to talk to him about something and he just seemed to be on the phone forever. And eventually the phone went down and I said, who are you talking to? And he said, that was ITV journalists. They're talking about the Brown case. So he was still dealing with that. He was still signing off constituency letters. He was adamant. When he broke his arm, I went to help him one day and he went, nope. He said, why? I can still do stuff. I'm doing it for myself. I still want my dignity. He never lost any weight. He had a thick thatch of hair. He lost some of his hair, but he still had hair. He hadn't gone bald. It was thinning.
He didn't look sick.
He didn't look sick. He hadn't lost any weight. He was still working. I then went out on a Saturday to take my son to this open day for this sixth form school. And it was during when we had the petrol crisis.
Mm-hmm.
So I phoned him up to say we'd gone on the train, and I said, "Oh, I'm due back any minute." And he said, "Oh, I'll get the kettle on." So he made himself, and he looked, you know, he'd got himself out of bed that day. He'd made breakfast that day. He'd made lunch that day. And he said, "Oh, I'll put the kettle on." And I said, "Oh, no, don't bother. I've heard that there's a petrol station nearby." And I said, "We need some petrol later on to take you to Guy's and St Thomas's, because we chose not to go on the trains to be in the public area because we didn't want to get germs. So I often used to drive up." So he went, yeah, fine. He said, "Well, okay." So literally I dropped my son in the door and I said, "Oh, hi, we're back." I said, "But I'm going again." And he said, "No worries." He said, "Phone me again." He said, "And I'll start dinner." And he said, "I'll heat up your cup of tea for you," because he'd already made it. And he said, "I'll put it back in the microwave." So I queued up for half an hour, got my petrol, came home, and he started off tea. And we spent an evening together. And that was our last evening together at home.
What happened?
Yeah, we went to bed as normal. He woke up at sort of 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, and he said, "I'm really uncomfortable. I can't get comfortable." He said, "I'm fed up with being in this bed." He said, "I'm going to go downstairs." And I went, "Do you mind if I stay in bed a bit longer?" Because I said we had an early start yesterday and it was a full-on day. And he went, no, that's fine. He said, "I'm going downstairs." So he went downstairs, and it got to about 9 o'clock, quarter to 9 o'clock. And I thought, I think I should get up. So I went up and came downstairs and I went, "How are you?" And he went, "I'm not feeling right." And he had an oximeter, you know, these things. Yeah. And he said, my oxygen levels aren't right. So I'm like, "Well, why didn't you wake me? Why didn't?" And he's like, "No, you needed your sleep." And I said, "Well, you need to be." And he said, "Yeah, I was just about to phone the lung cancer nurse specialist at Guy's and St Thomas's." He said, "But I was waiting for you." So we phoned, and he explained, and she said, "You need to phone 999. So he phoned 999 and explained that his oxygen levels weren't right. And they went, "You shouldn't be this coherent. And are you sure you're reading the measures right?" And he had it on loudspeaker. And I went, "I'm sitting on the edge of the chair next to him. He is reading it correctly." And they said, "We're sending you an ambulance." And the ambulance came. And they went, "No, you need to go to hospital." And he left, and I couldn't go with him because of lockdown. And he only went to Darrants Valley, so he was 10 minutes up the road, but I couldn't go with him.
That thought of watching somebody you love. I mean, I've experienced, because, you know, my alive husband had COVID, and watching him go into the ambulance, not knowing whether he'd come home again. I really feel for you. That's that isolation and the loneliness. And you go from one extreme where everybody wants to know what's going on, but nobody can be with you.
And one of the neighbours saw the ambulance and they said, "Oh, is everything all right?" Because everybody knew he was poorly. I mean, this is a terrible, terrible thing to say, and I'm skipping forward, but there was a sense of relief when he had died, because we weren't living in a goldfish bowl. We didn't have to pretend, and there was a relief. But one of the neighbours saw him go off in the ambulance and they said, "Oh, is everything all right?" And I went, "Yeah, hopefully." And I just walked into the house because I couldn't actually have that conversation. And I sort of said to the kids, "I don't know if Dad's coming back." And they looked at me, because again, we'd had that, we need to be open and honest. And I went, "Well, I don't know." I said, "But it's just that sixth sense."
It's that hope for the best, prepare for the worst situation, isn't it?
Yeah. And again, I was able to visit him for an hour on the Sunday, and I went and visited him, and they couldn't stabilise the oxygen levels, and I could see he was wide up and it kept bleeping red. And then there was another patient that was trying to smoke in there, and
oh my God,
you're not supposed to smoke in
hospital anyway.
But when you've got people on oxygen, it's a little bit dangerous.
It's a little bit lethal, yeah.
Yeah. So there was some strong words being said. So that was a distraction. And then I agreed to meet him on the Monday, because you had to have timed appointments at the hospital at that stage. And it was the day that the Stop Oil protesters decided to climb the Dartford Crossing Bridge. There was absolute mayhem, because I'm only 10 minutes away from that. Absolute mayhem. And Darrants Valley is 10 minutes away. It took me 2.5 hours
Oh,
to
I
get
bet you
to.
were so angry.
I wasn't angry, but in the back of my mind, was kept thinking, because I'd already got it that he wasn't going to survive, and I was just thinking, I hope nothing's happening now, and I'm not there with him. Took me 2.5 hours. I got in, and I was late for my appointment, and I didn't know whether they'd let me in, and they went, "No, we'll let you in." And I thought, okay,
A little
that's.
bit of humanity, thank goodness.
But also, to me, that spoke volumes that they were
Yes.
allowing me in. And I sat and waited, and we chatted and whatever. And I said to him, "I'm really sorry, I've got to go," because my daughter had just started. So although days before because there's a school year part between my younger two. So days before I'd been sorting out sixth form school with my son, my daughter had just started a new sixth form school. And as I alluded to earlier, my family's neurodivergent. So I had a meeting with the Senko rep and what have you. And it was supposed to be a Zoom meeting at home. So I left. It took me 2 hours to get home. But I phoned the school. You're not supposed to use your phone, are you? But we were static. And I thought, I'm going to phone the school. And I phoned them and said, look, I can't do a Zoom call. I said, I've got hands free. I can do an audio call with you. And she said, okay. She said, but if you need to move and whatever, we'll just stop the call. And I went, fine. We had a 20-minute conversation, and I hadn't moved. And we dealt with what we needed to deal with. I got home, put the kettle on, because I hadn't eaten or drunk at this day. And I was just thinking about, well, I kind of need some lunch, and let's find some food. Put the kettle on, and the phone rang, and it was the hospital. And they said, can you come back? And I'm like, yeah, I'm on my way. I said, but I don't know how long it's going to take me. I'm only a minute down the road, but an hour and a half back. 5.5 hours I was that day in the car, just because of the situation. Got back, and they wanted me in because they were talking about putting him on a ventilator. They couldn't get his lung, the one lung he had left, to stabilise. And they wanted to talk to us about the wares and the pitfalls of going on a ventilator, and James wanted me there to hear it as well. So they had that conversation with us, but they had given him antibiotics, and they just wanted to see. So anyhow, I went the next day, and the next day that it was decided that yes, he was going to have to go on the ventilator.
And that takes away their speech, doesn't it? Because they can no longer communicate.
Yes.
And that must have been incredibly difficult.
So we kind of hugged each other and told each other how much we loved each other and whatever. And he said to me, you're going to have to tell the Prime Minister. By this time it was Boris Johnson, because I don't know what's going to happen, but you need to tell, because James was still an MP, he was still an employee. You're going to have to tell Boris Johnson, you need to tell the Cabinet Secretary, and you need to tell Theresa as well. Wasn't Theresa May, it was Priti Patel, who was the Home Secretary then. And I went, if I do that, I said, I'm more than happy to do that. I said, but I'm going to have to take your phone. He was stuck in the hospital on his own, and all he had in the world to converse with was his phone. And I went, I'm going to have to take your phone, because I said, phoning those 3 people with my phone is going to come up as an unknown number. None of them are going to answer me. But if I use your phone, it's going to come up with your name, and they'll all answer. So he went, yeah, okay, take my phone. So I took his phone, and I came home, and I phoned all 3 of them to say, he's going on a ventilator. I don't know which way this is going to go, but he needs you to know. And they all said, keep us posted and what have you. And then I just thought, I've now got to tell family and friends. I mean, family knew, but some of the wider friends didn't know. And I thought, well, if I'm telling his work colleagues, I've got to tell close friends. So I had to tell close friends, and some of them we hadn't spoken to for a little while. And as you're saying, it's quite a rapid speed of events. Some people had spoken to him earlier in the week, and now we're saying he's going on a ventilator. And I'm having to be strong, making all these phone calls, and people are hearing it as, in effect, like a bolt out of the blue. And then I went in on the Wednesday, and he went on the ventilator on the Tuesday night. And they put me in the sort of patient waiting room. and the surgeon came back out, and I went, "Oh, you're back quick. Has the procedure gone okay?" And he said, "No." He said, I've just said to James one more time the consequences, that he may not survive the operation of the ventilator, and the fact that it's going to be a long recovery if he does improve and we can get the lung to recover, and he's going to have a whole load of physio and whatever. And is he sure he really wants to go down this road? And he's just told me it's not my decision, it's Cathy's decision. She's got to live with the consequences. And I can't make that decision. She's got to make it. I'm putting my life in her hands.
The responsibility.
Yeah, he said, I'm putting my life in her hands. She needs to decide. And I just said to him, there isn't a choice. I have to give it a try and stop the consequences. So they did the tracheotomy and he survived the op. And then I went in on the Wednesday and the consultant said, look, and the consultant at Darrenth had been on the phone daily to the team at Guy's and St Thomas's, and they were all trying to work out what to do. Ultimately, they wanted to move him back to Guy's and St Thomas's, but he wasn't well enough. And the consultant said, I know he's highly respected because I can see it from the team of medical consultants. Everybody loves him. And he said, I've spoken to your husband. He's a lovely guy. And he said, in all honesty, he said, if this was somebody else, we wouldn't have tried as much as we've tried. And he said, but he's not going to make it. And at some point, we need to turn off everything. And I just said to him, look, you've just tried a new course of antibiotics. And I said, look, I'm not medical. I said, but if it was one of my children and I was there, the doctor would say, you need to give it 24, 48 hours before you see the benefits. And I said, he hasn't had 48 hours on the antibiotics yet. So can we wait one more time or another day? And he said, I will do that for you because of who he is. Yes, I will do that. So I then came home and my kids are all, I've got one in Manchester, I've got one away at school, and I've got my son upstairs. And we had a Zoom conversation, and I basically I said, we need to decide what to do. They're telling me I need to switch off stuff. And it has to be a family decision. I can't make that decision on my own. And the kids said, Mum, you've got to live with the consequences. You're married to Dad. We're not there 24/7. And ultimately you're going to be Dad's carer if something happens to him. So you have to decide. We'll support you. So I said, well, I'll go back in and see if there's any change tomorrow. And I said, maybe we need to think about it. So anyhow, I went back in and he said he's not recovered. So I said, right, okay, I need to phone my children again and have that conversation. And he said, you're just delaying it. And I had another hour's conversation with the consultant, and I went, okay, let's do it. So that was the Thursday, and that's the day he died. So I phoned my daughter in Edinburgh and I said, they can keep him on the ventilator until you get here if you want. And she just said to me, I don't know if I can cope with it, Mum. I want to remember Dad as he was. And I'm like, fine. And I spoke to my daughter and she said, Mum, I'm coming home. I want to say goodbye. So she came home, but she'd only just started this school in September and she was in deepest, darkest Kent. And trying to get her home was a bit of a nightmare, and they were suggesting getting her on trains. And I went, she hasn't even done the train. I mean, okay, she was 16, but I said, she hasn't even done the train journey from home to the school.
And she'll be distressed.
Without stress. And one of the teachers there said, we'll drive her to the hospital for you.
It's those little acts of kindness. It really is. People don't know how much of a difference they make.
So she drove her to the hospital, and my son was coming home from school on the bus, and I didn't want him to be on his own. And I then said to my cousin, he lives in Petswood, and at the start of the week, he was one of the friends and family that I told, and he just said, look, I'm down the road, Kate. If you need me, I'm on my way. He said, I've got quite a light week, and he works from home. He said, but we'll drop anything and we'll come. So I phoned him and I said, I think I need you to meet Ben. I said, because I've got to tell Ben it's definitely happening. He's got a whiff of it, but he doesn't know it's happening today. And obviously I'm at the hospital and I can't leave and I don't want him to be on his own. So my cousins turned up and met him here. And Ben got off the bus. But with my son didn't expect my cousins to be there. We have a burglar alarm because of James's role for Northern Ireland Secretary that goes straight to the police.
Oh God, I can feel.
Yeah,
I'm having a sixth sense now.
Yeah, in the middle of all of this, my son forgot the burglar alarm number and set off the burglar alarm, and yes, the police turned up in the middle of it. So there's the police, the cousins, and Ben here,
and the noise of the alarm.
And the noise of the alarm. I've got the police on the phone phoning me. I've got my cousin on the phone saying, how do we turn off the alarm? Ben can't do it. So we had to walk through all of that. And my cousin's going, and they're saying, is Cathy here? And she's going, no, she's not here. We've just come to meet the son. And them not really saying why they're here.
But then the police are thinking this isn't adding up here.
So we stood all that down. So we had all of that. And then I had to wait for my daughter to turn up. And she turned up. And then we went in and switched off the ventilator. But the consultant said, oh, would you like a priest? And I'm not deeply religious, but my husband is a believer. So they sent somebody down and we did that with him. But he just looked at me and my daughter and he said to my daughter, is this your husband? And I looked at him and I went, no, that's my daughter and it's my husband. And he went, and I thought, my thought was, are you trying to say I look really old? Because I don't think I look as old as I am.
His memory is being told he looks so young that he could be going out with his daughter. So, swings and roundabouts.
Yeah, but I was like, but I don't think I look that old. Do you think I'm like, who do you think I am?
I love that women's vanity, no matter what the situation. Hang on a minute.
So anyhow, we said goodbye to him. And then I phoned my cousin to say, look, I'm on my way home. And he said, I'll come and collect you. And I went, no, there's no point. I've got the car here. He's only 10 minutes down the road. And he went, but you can't be in a fit state to drive. But it was that sense of relief that he'd passed away. I wasn't living in a goldfish bowl. Fundamentally, until he went into hospital, although he was sick with cancer, he was living a normal life. He was still working. He was still looking after himself. He hadn't lost any weight, as I said. He still had a full head of hair. He cooked me dinner. We had a lovely last evening together. And although those 4 days would have been hell for him in there and not being with us and knowing what was going to happen fundamentally, we as a family didn't have to watch him get sicker and sicker and waiting and waiting and waiting for something to happen, knowing that something's going to happen, but you don't know when it was going to happen. And I think for me, that has massively helped me in dealing with the loss of him.
One of the something that you said quite early on was about him not wanting to lose his dignity and his pride, not wanting you to help with when he broke his arm. And I guess
not many people know he's broken his arm because he didn't tell many people.
Tell anyone. And I guess for a man like that to literally kind of disintegrate before you, which so many cancer patients do.
Just get snuffed overnight almost.
Yeah.
Snuffed away. Yeah. I take great comfort in that.
Yeah.
I take the fact that I was going to lose him anyhow.
Yes, so you can't remove that from the situation, from the circumstance, can you? So that's happening.
He could have survived another 6 months. He could have survived another year.
In agony.
And in getting worse and worse and worse. And we living in the Goldfish Bowl, people asking questions. I mean, we used to walk outside the front door to go for a walk. And constituents and neighbours would just go, how are you today? And all you want to do is just go for a walk. And they weren't being malicious. They were being lovely and kind. There was nothing malice in it. But what they didn't know is we just turned a corner and had the conversation 2 minutes ago.
Yeah.
And it could happen 5 or 6 times.
You almost need a little badge, don't you? Like when you're pregnant, I don't know the sex. I'm due here. Yes, I know I'm enormous, but for cancer.
Yeah.
Now, what about his funeral? I'm going to hazard a guess that was quite the event.
he had 3 memorials, 3
Wow.
services. So Friday morning, the news hadn't broken because he died Thursday evening. Friday morning, I had a team of friends. There was about 8 people here. And that night I didn't sleep, surprisingly. And I knew that he had to have a funeral befitting to his status. I also knew from his previous illnesses, there would be an outpouring. So when he first got diagnosed when he was 50, we've got a wad of papers and cards like this that were sent to us. Some people are people we know, lots of people he worked with, some are from complete strangers that have had a similar illness. And they were messages of hope. I've been diagnosed with cancer. I had it, lung cancer X amount of years ago. Don't agree with your politics, but I can see you're a good guy. So I knew there'd be an outpouring. And I said to one of my friends, Simon, we need to harness that. And I'd like to do something. And I'm thinking about setting up a tribute page, which is still there today. So that's raised.
I've got the figures here somewhere. £165,000
167
as of last year. So that's gone up since then.
£167,000 it's raised. I'd love to get it to 200,000 or a £250,000, but hey ho.
Well, we will put a link in the show notes for this. So if anybody does want to donate, and it can be 50p, it can be £50, it can be 50p a pound. Every little bit goes into the pot, doesn't it?
Yeah. So the funeral, well, we ended up, I think it was 5 or 6 key ministers and government officials. So where James and I had Northern Ireland Protection, we had 5 what they call principals. So there was 5 teams of protection officers involved with the people that we had coming to the funeral. And the only way I can liken it to is you're in your hour of grief, your rock solid soulmate that you lean on isn't there. I'm now trying to organise a funeral, which is like, if you can imagine,
it's organising a wedding, isn't it?
Organising a wedding, but you don't know who the guests are. You have got no idea who the guests are, because I don't know everyone he's in his world.
And you don't know who's going to turn up. You don't know how many you're catering for.
Well, we were lucky enough because it's back end of October 21. So lockdown we were coming out of, so we could still have the church packed to the rafters, but there was nowhere big enough to take an event, because all the big hotels around here had their bigger spaces. They decompartmentalised and made smaller meeting spaces and what have you. So there was nowhere that could hold anywhere. So we had over 350 people to his funeral, and there were prime ministers there, former prime ministers there. Theresa May did a speech. Various friends did speeches. It was on the news. I mean, that's the other thing. He dies and it's all over the news again. And you just put on the TV and you watch something innocuous, and then you leave the TV running and it's the news, and he's this big grinning smiley face at you. So it was the phone did not stop ringing for all that week. And the team of people helped organise the funeral. I then had another team of people come on the Saturday, and they started phoning up people once we started establishing how, when, why we were going to do it. I had some washing that I put in the washing machine on the Thursday before he died. I think it went round the washing machine 7 times because I kept forgetting about it. And eventually, about a week later, I managed to get it out and hang it up. And it was getting critical. I needed to iron it because the kids, by this stage, we'd done the funeral and they were going back to work, and they were needed school uniform. And I'm like, I need to get this ironed. But yeah, utter madness. And I kind of, for 10 days or so, you're just on autopilot, aren't you?
Yeah, you are. And because you're in the public eye, then you're also I'm guessing, but I found myself, even in the moment the police were telling me, really overthinking how I reacted. Like, how does a normal person react to this? partly that might be the neurodiversity, because you're always looking to mimic others' reactions to things. And quite frankly, I've never seen anybody have this happen to them. But you are more public property perhaps than you even were before.
It was so weird. I was phoning people and telling people, and I could hear friends telling people, and I could hear people crying and wailing, and I'm having to comfort people.
Yeah, I hung up on a couple of people that did that to me, I have to say.
I didn't.
You're a nicer person.
I don't know about that. I think for me it was going back to that sense of relief. He's not suffering. And it also showed the love that they had for him. So in that respect, I found that comforting.
Yeah, I do get that. I do. Ben's funeral, somebody told me afterwards that one of the school dads, who didn't really know us that well, had cried. And I remember being weirdly pleased, because I was like, good. I'm glad that it's impacting you like this, because it's really terrible.
That's right. Well, we had the main funeral service with really close family and friends and the entourage of dignitaries, but then various constituent people living in the constituencies wanted to come, but there just wasn't the space. So very early on, I phoned up the leader of the local council and just said, is there any way we can have some sort of civic memorial for James, which we organised as well. And to that was the people in the community and friends came to that. Wow. And also the nursing team out of Guy's and St Thomas's, and they spoke. And I didn't have anything to do. I suggested people to invite, but the council sorted out all of that memorial. Wow. And school children singing, and we had the nurses come and say bits. It was incredible.
Oh my God, it's making me get all emotional. How on earth did you sit through it?
And then in the May after, so 6 months later, then I had a memorial in Westminster, and there was about 500 people coming to that. Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Yeah.
What a man. And we talk about people in public service, and they're called public servants, and there is so much negativity about politicians. You know, you only have to say the word politician and people go, oh, you know, tosser. But to hear the story of James, to hear what kind of a man he was, to hear that he genuinely gave his life to public service, and he did so willingly and with so much conviction and passion, it feels a huge injustice to both you and your family, but also to the greater good of the country, because we need more people like that running the country. We need more people that care.
When Liz Truss became Prime Minister, and then in turn Rishi became Prime Minister, I had lots of people coming up to me, one either saying, we want James here for his council, we just want to talk to him about the direction and the way forward. But I also had others saying he should have his name there. He never wanted it, but if he'd been asked, he most probably would have said yes, because he didn't want to let anyone down. But lots of people came up to me and said he should have been Prime Minister. I mean, who knows?
Now, much as James was incredibly passionate about what he did, and, you know, we just described him as being, you know, the kind of epitome of a public servant, you also have turned this enormous tragedy into something that has had a positive impact. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
More than pleasure, will do. I very early on made the conscious decision that I can sit in the corner and cry and weep. And as I said to you, I knew there'd be an outpouring. And by the day that he died, we'd raised £5,000. By the time of the funeral, 2 weeks later, we raised £50,000. And I'd like to attribute all the other monies that has been raised after the funeral was to me and the efforts of my friends.
Yeah.
And I had people sending me, I mean, I've got another massive box full of letters and correspondence that people sent me. And some of those sent me cash in the post.
Oh, wow.
So I went straight to Roy Castle and said, I mean, we'd already set up the tribute page with that feeding to Roy Castle. And I said, well, I've now got cash, and you guys need to have this. And they said, well, why don't you come up and see, because they're based in Liverpool, why don't you come up and see us? And so I went up and went on a day that there was a trustees meeting, and I had a tour of the offices and the labs that have been specially built with monies that Roy Castle raised all those years ago in the 90s. And I was asked to be a trustee. And it kind of snowballed from there. And equally, part of James's legacy, he's had a train named after him.
A train?
A train on Southeastern. There's a train that travels up and down my line, and it bears his name. And I went to the unveiling of that and sort of, cut the ribbon, shall we say, of the train that was named after him. And that ended up being on the news with Roy Castle on ITV. And from that, I've done lots of other, I've done every news station going, basically, talking about lung cancer awareness. And I've helped September, not last year, the previous year, Roy Castle had been campaigning for lung cancer screening. And James dying, him being who in the public eye, him, being good friends of politicians, but then me doing various news campaigns, articles in newspapers, podcasts, radio stations, has upped the game, and we've now got lung cancer screening agreed in England, and I'm now trying to get it in the rest of the UK as well.
So talk to me about the screening. How do they screen, and what age do they do it?
So it will be rolled out across. We've been doing targeted and lung cancer screening to prove all the stats and statistics, and that was just falling into place pre-COVID, and COVID put the stops on all of that. And then obviously they've built that back up after COVID, and it's now been agreed. You will be screened from the ages of 55 to 74 of all those that have smoked or know someone within their family that, blood relative that have died of lung cancer. And you will go through, and it will be, you have to have smoked. So in all honesty, it won't help the likes of James. James, as we discussed, was a never smoker. It won't help him, but it might help my children in the future. And that's the driving force for me.
And is that something that you have concerns about, is whether it was a hereditary cancer?
And I will never know.
Yeah.
I will never. But equally, I have, along my lung cancer journey since he's passed away, I've met people that have heard me on TV. And one lady in particular, she was told she was fat and menopausal and to go home and stop worrying. And she heard me talk about my symptoms, or talk about the symptoms, and she went back and asked for a second opinion, and she was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer. But she's now on experimental treatment, and she survived 2 more Christmases.
Oh, wow.
And she's alive today, and I only know about her because she's a friend of a friend, and I know there will be others along the way.
Of course there will be. Gosh, so not only has he left this incredible legacy, but you are literally saving lives by promoting awareness.
Yeah, definitely.
Not that I can speak for him, but I think he'd probably be quite proud of you.
Friends say that, and the lasting legacy that he's left, the local hospital have named their function room or their sort of conference room after him. His old school were back in Loughton in Essex. They were building a new block, and they've named that after him. Where we used to live in Loughton, there is a block of flats that they've named after him. He's fundamentally started all this, but to me, it was the obvious thing to pick up the mantle where he left off. He talked about lung cancer on the floor of the House of Commons to raise the debate to try and help the lung cancer screening issue. I lost everything overnight. I was PA to his personal world. I lost my soulmate and my husband and my lover. And to me, I had to show my kids that life goes on. And it was the most natural thing to do to get involved, and it's just taken off.
And you do need a purpose, don't you, when this happens? And quite a few widows will turn to fundraising, or they'll do ridiculous athletic pursuits. But what you've been able to do is kind of, what's the word? You've sort of been able to use the status, if you like, that being James's wife brought with it. But instead of, you've used it to do good. And I just think that's incredible because, not all of us could raise that level of money, but you were in a position where you could. And this idea that you were together for so long, you were partners. So what you're doing is you're continuing the partnership, but you are doing it alone.
But I've also met some incredible people along the way. I've heard some amazing stories. And I'm a people person. I love hearing people's backstories and sharing. And I feel very privileged to being able to do what I do. And I kind of feel like at some point, I'm just me. It's just little old me. And someone's going to realise that.
Imposter syndrome. I recognise that. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think I've released 130 episodes nearly, and I still will sit and be like this, I can't do it. Who do I think I am? But like you, the gift of being widowed, if you like, the one trade-off has been the community I've met. And like you, I get to, lucky me, I get to talk to people like this. I get to hear and I get to ask questions that normal people can't ask. You can't ask those in the street. And it's very powerful. It's quite, initially I found it quite difficult because you take a lot of grief. But yes, this idea of being interested in people and wanting to know more about them, and that has been a real surprising joy that I've had brought back in my life.
Definitely. No, I can understand that and empathise with that. Yeah, definitely.
Well, Cathy, thank you so much for coming on today. Is there anything else you wanted to say before I cut you off in your prime?
I know you often ask, are you in a new relationship? And I am in a new relationship.
Oh, yes, I didn't ask that. Yes, thank you for knowing my script better than me. Come on, spill the tea.
So it's a fairly new relationship, but I've met somebody. We've met through friends. For a long while, people have been asking me what's happening in my dating world or non-existent dating world.
It's a scary old world out there, isn't it? It wasn't like it was back in our 20s.
It's a really old world. And John heard about me in the summer, but I didn't hear about him. But he took the view that I would be a stuffing, boring old politician's wife.
So him, didn't you?
Yeah. But no, we've met the tail end of last year, and we're having a lot of fun getting to know each other.
Amazing. And again, just to reiterate, you said earlier that you had a choice. You had a choice that you could sit in the corner and cry, or you had the choice that you could go on and do great things in his memory, but also for you, because it's not all about their legacy. It's also about the fact that you hopefully have quite a few decades left on the planet. We do deserve to be happy, but in order to get there, you have to make some really tough choices along the way.
Definitely.
Well, I'm going to say it. This has been one of my favourite interviews. It's been absolutely fascinating. Just don't tell the others. I feel like I've learned so much about politics, about medical stuff, and so much about James and you as people. And that, like I said before, that kind of is the greatest gift that I get from this, is learning about people. And I think many people listening will have been touched by this. Many people might have questions. I'll caution them not to bombard your phone. You don't like that happening. But you can message me. You can message me and I can pass on questions and things. And we'll put some links to resources, and we'll put some links to the foundation funding as well, because I think that what you're doing out there is incredible. I didn't know a lot of this.
I've actually got a gentleman called Andrew Waller who's running in the London Marathon.
Oh, have you?
Roy Castle for me, so I'm helping.
You didn't fancy it yourself, Cathy, no?
I don't think I've got the knees for it, to be quite honest. I do like walking, and I could most probably walk it, but no, I don't fancy it.
I did
too much.
I like that. Look, I've managed to sneak it into another episode. I've done a marathon. I did Manchester Marathon. Ben died in March. I did it the following April, and it was absolutely hideous. And now I will never do another one. But like you, I used the platform that I had and raised quite a lot of money for a children's grief charity. So it was worth it. But no, I don't run anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you for coming on today and speaking so eloquently and sharing your story. For everybody out there, I hope that you're doing all right. I'll be back with you next week. And as I said, if you've got any questions, let me know. And I would just ask you just to give us a like and a subscribe, because otherwise we get lost. Thank you so much for listening. And Cathy, thank you to you for coming on. It's been an absolute honour to meet you. Although you did tell me at the beginning that we met at Woodstock, but I was very social butterfly that day. But I have a feeling we might meet again. We're not that far away, eh?
Thank you for having me, and thank you for letting me share my story.
Oh, it's been an honour. Thank you for trusting me with it. Take care. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening. If you found this episode helpful, hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you think someone else may benefit from this, please do share. We'd also really appreciate a quick review. It helps more people find the show. Thank you again, and see you next time on Widowed AF.